Podcast, the Cats and Bolts. 3, 2, 1.
Thank you, Benjamin Castro. Hi, everybody. Welcome inside Podcast Junkie Studios in beautiful downtown Boca Raton, Florida. It's a very special show. Rod Peterson here, Sarina Taylor there. It's 30 minutes of your favorite hockey talk. Brought to you by our friends at Beach House, Pompano, and Boresco right across the street. You're looking on the screen. Everybody was excited. They called you the OG, Jeff Rimmer, the original gangster, the original voice of the Florida Panthers. Welcome to the program, buddy.
Great to be here again. Thank you, Rod.
That was my daytime show that you were on, the Rod Peterson Show. This Cats and Bolts podcast is, we're in season 2, episode 7, but it's your inaugural here. I'm sorry that Doug MacLean beat you to the punch here, though.
Well, I'm a little disappointed in that because Doug can't beat me at anything. And the fact that you say he beat me to get to this show,
Sorry,
I'm
man.
disappointed.
Oh.
Of course, he did tell me that you said on the previous show that I was on with you that Doug was a much better guest than me, and I knew that it was totally false.
Yeah, there's no chance of that. Oh, yeah, he beat the career broadcaster, the Hall of Fame 2,500, 20, how many did you end with?
Over 2,500, 25 plus.
That's all?
That's all.
National Hockey League broadcast.
20 years in Columbus, retired at the end of last season. 47 years in the National Hockey League.
Unreal.
A broadcaster, parts of what? 6 decades, and I'm only 29. Can you believe that?
No.
I believe it.
Started young.
Look at this guy. Everybody, I'm not joking, Jeff. Everybody was excited to have you on, and my questions are all going to go out of order here. But I look at your 20 years basically with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Was it 20?
Exactly 20.
10 with the Panthers?
10 with the Panthers.
Everybody thinks of you as the Panthers guy.
And I also was 10 in Washington with the Capitals before I ever got to Florida.
How about
And
that?
7 in Montreal, working with Dick Irvin, who you, as a Canadian, would certainly remember.
That
don't
had
get me,
to have been.
get
I'll
me
tell you
going.
what, I'm very fortunate to have been hired and worked for the 2 top sportscasters in Canada of all time. Dick Irvin, of course, in the East, and he hired me in 1977. Previous to that, I got hired out of Lethbridge, Alberta, to go to CBC and hired by the Golden Greek, Ernie Afaganis. So
Wow. Listen, I'm just going to turn you over to Sarina, and I'll get to my question.
much
She's all
better,
excited.
much better person. I'd rather talk to her.
I know.
anyway.
Everybody would.
He's only really here to kind of organize things.
Right.
It's just, it's unspoken.
I'm the brains. She's the beauty.
yeah.
We'll decide that after the show.
Thank you. Just like we'll decide if you're better than Doug.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is going to, time will tell.
Let her rip, Sarina.
So when you mentioned Dick Irvin, immediately my ears popped up because I love that old broadcasting. I mean, this is legitimate stuff here. Talk to me about your time with the Habs and with Dick Irvin.
Well, it wasn't only with Dick Irvin. I ended up doing both baseball with the Expos and with the Canadians. It's funny because I got to Montreal in a strange way. I married my wife, who we got engaged in a week, got married in 2.5 months. I only saw her for 4 days between the time we got engaged and married. Long story, I'm going to make it short. I brought her from Los Angeles to Edmonton, and she never left the house. When it's 40 below for 2 consecutive months, she was going to have no part of that. So anyway, fast forward, I promised her after I did the Olympics in 1976, I did gymnastics with Nadia Comaneci. And I promised her, hey, we'll go to LA, I'll see what I can do. I ended up getting a television job with some help from Bryant Gumbel, who at the time was working at NBC. And I got a weekend TV job at KHJ Television in Los Angeles, but I didn't get the full-time job. And I applied for a job with the LA Kings to do radio. Jake Milford, the general manager at the time, terrific person, he tried to get Jack Kent Cooke, Canadian, by the way, to hire me. And Jack Kent Cooke said, this guy Rimmer sounds too much like a Canadian. We are not hiring a Canadian. And he's from Canada. So I said, it's
Nice
time
guy.
to go back. Time to go back. Sent my tape out west, back to the CBC and to the east to Johnny Esau in Toronto. He passed the tape on to Dick Irvin. But before I got the call from Dick, same day, in the morning, I got a call from CBC Calgary. And I accepted the job to go back to the CBC and go to Calgary with the idea that maybe down the road I would get a chance to do hockey again and work alongside Dick Irvin than Danny Gallivan. Well, a better offer came about an hour later, but I told Dick, I said, Dick, I've already accepted the job, so I can't go back on it. He said, hold on, Jeff. I'll call you back in an hour. Call back in an hour, offered me $2,000 a year more. Wow. But then said, you get a chance to work the Montreal Canadiens hockey broadcasts on radio. Well, that did it. I called Calgary back. I accepted the job, went to Montreal, and ended up doing pre and post on Canadiens and on the Montreal Expos. So fast forward, every Saturday, I got a chance to do a little more than just, hosting and pregame and postgame. And who did I hang out with Saturday mornings at the skate? But the great Danny Gallivan, best broadcaster hockey of all time, in my opinion. There's a long story that I tried to make as short as possible.
It's very entertaining. But somehow or another, through all of that, you ended up in Florida, and I think the Panthers fans should know, if they don't already, the only reason you left was because of a lockout.
Yeah, it was 2004. Jeff Gentner was the general manager. Then it was Fox. And he called Dennis Potvin, my broadcast partner for the first 10 years, called us both in and said, listen, want to take care of you and your families. It looks like we could have a lockout in the event we do. And believe me, they knew. Gary Bettman told all the owners, who in turn told all the television networks, there's going to be a lockout. We want a salary cap. And whatever it took to get the salary cap, they were going to get. So back to Gentner, he said, here's a piece of paper. This is what we're going to pay you. And it just wasn't feasible enough. In fact, I got a phone call from Doug, the aforementioned Doug MacLean. He said, I wanted you here when the franchise started. I will pay you your full salary in the lockout if you come. It was a no-brainer. I told Fox. Actually, Fox found out before I even got back to town, because someone in the Blue Jackets front office called the network and said, hey, we're going to hire Jeff Rimmer. He in turn called his compatriot in Florida, Jeff, and we were pretty tight, and said, hey, Rimmer's leaving you.
Whoops.
He's coming to Columbus. So anyway, it was the right move at the right time. As it turned out, it was the best move, because the Blue Jackets were a great organization. Unfortunately, not so much on the ice, but they're only a step away. I think that, and we can talk about it later, but I think they're on the verge with all the great draft picks that they've made here over the last several years. They're ready to take, I think, a big step.
I do want to talk about the Blue Jackets in a second, because I do feel the same way you do about them. But one thing I don't think people hear, having such a young franchise and everybody's got their own broadcast team, I think what a lot of people down here don't realize is the magnitude of you getting to work for the Montreal Canadiens. When we were growing up, we didn't just get to watch every hockey game.
Right.
We had to watch Hockey Night in Canada, whatever was on, or listen to it. Saturday night, it was Toronto on English CBC, Montreal and French CBC, and then Stampede Wrestling after. That's what we got. So for you to get a job up there, this is a big deal. Throwing around the name like Danny Gallivan, everybody in Canada knows who Danny Gallivan is.
Absolutely.
Nowadays, it's so different. And thankfully it is, because people like you were able to go experience all those different things. So do you feel like you kind of started as a pioneer and you transitioned into what's currently happening now in the National Hockey League with all these teams having their own broadcasters?
Oh, yeah, without question. When I was growing up in Toronto before moving out west, when my mom remarried after my dad passed away, I was a Leaf fan. And it was always Saturday night, Hockey Night in Canada. It was special. And my favorite player was Frank Mahovlich, the Big M. And I got to know Frank a little bit as the years went on, but the guy that I got pretty close to was Pete Mahovlich, and he's a character.
I've heard that.
Hey,
yeah.
I am so fortunate over the years. I mean, I'm a guy that talked players in the National Hockey League. If you know Toronto, the players would take the subway from then the Royal York Hotel. It wasn't like now they're staying at Ritz-Carltons and Four Season hotels. It was the Royal York, which wasn't a bad hotel, but it was the hotel. And I would wait at Carleton Street and Yonge for the players to come up. I talked Bobby Hull. And before it became fashionable for autographs, I got Bobby Hull's autograph. And I talked him into sneaking me in to Maple Leaf Gardens for Saturday morning skates. And Sid Abel, when Detroit came in, Sid Abel, the legendary former player, a Hall of Famer, coach, general manager, I got Sid Abel not only to bring me in, but have me go on the team bus and take me back to the Royal York Hotel to buy lunch. He was just fascinated by all the hockey knowledge that I had. And it was just something that was ingrained in me. And my dad, I had cousins, and they were all brilliant. And there'd be family gatherings, and the report cards would come out, except one, mine, because I was a Leaf fan, a National Hockey League fan, and school wasn't important to me. My cousins, one became a top attorney, real estate attorney in Toronto. One became a dentist. One became a professor at York University. And there I was. And my uncle would say, well, you got to find a profession, young man. I wish my dad was around. He passed away prematurely at a very young age, because he would always say to me, Frank Mahovlich is not going to get you a job when you grow up. You need to apply your studies. And again, I'm very fortunate.
He knows, Jeff. You know it.
I hope so.
He knows. What I'm dying to know is, what was it like in South Florida in 1993? Because I showed up here. This is my 4th season covering the Panthers. I showed up at a really good time. Everybody knows about the team.
Front runner. You're a front runner.
Yeah.
You knew they were just steps away, and you said, I'm going to Florida because I can feel something's going to happen here. Where were you in those lean years? 96 was a great year.
That's what everybody says to me.
Yeah.
You were here.
I was here.
So what was it like back then?
It was outstanding. That first season, 93, 94, again, I got a phone call, asked me if I was interested. I was in Washington at the time, and I was recommended by Bobby Clark, who I got to know. He was in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, he just stayed here 1 year and then went back to the Flyers. In fact, he was driving an Ed Snyder-purchased BMW and never gave up the car and went back. And I don't blame Bobby for that, because he was a Flyer. But we were fortunate enough to have Bill Torrey hire Brian Murray, who did a terrific job and just one of my favorite all-time hockey people. But that 93-94 season, they set a record, inaugural year for most victories, almost made the playoffs, which presented a problem for me because I was still doing Washington Capitals games. And David Poyle called me in the office, then the general manager, and he said, okay, looks like both teams could make the playoffs. Whose games are you going to do? And it kind of presented a bit of a problem. I didn't want to give up the Capitals opportunity, but at the same time, I didn't want to. I had a 1-year contract at the time with Florida. They said, if you like us, we like you, we'll hire you to long term, which they did for 4 years. They came to Baltimore to sign me because I was also working for WBAL in Baltimore. And they all came up for the weekend, and they signed me to a 4-year deal when I was doing a CFL game. I forgot about this.
I
forgot. I did the CFL games in Baltimore for the then Baltimore Colts of the CFL when they lost their NFL franchise. I was talking more about college football in Canada at the time. But anyway, we worked out a long-term deal, and as it turned out, Florida didn't make the playoffs, and it came very, very close, almost to the last weekend. Of course, Washington didn't go too long, but they made the playoffs. But hey, it was a great move at the time. My family loved it, moving from Washington, Baltimore, and coming to Florida. My wife always wanted to go back to a warm climate after living in California. And of course, the rest is history.
Great history.
But you asked me, 93, 94 was great. 95, 96, 96, 97, we still, we're playoff teams. I got into a bit of a battle with Terry Murray, who was our coach in Washington. He claimed that I said that they hadn't had a shot on goal 25 times in the game, which I never did, and they didn't have a shot. Pavel Bure was on that team. They got swept 4 straight by New Jersey. I got called in by management there because Terry told his brother Brian, my friend, and Terry said, hey, my brother's complaining about Rimmer and his broadcasts. Well, I got called in. They put the tape on. I said it 4 times, not 25 times. And that was the end of the story there.
You were stating fact.
Yeah.
I'm always going to be on your side, Jeff.
Yeah, don't you love when non-broadcasters try to tell a broadcaster how to do their job?
100%.
Love that.
Or what
I
they
love
said.
that.
In 20 years in Columbus, except for Doug MacLean, you're doing a 3-hour infomercial. I've never had anybody tell me what to say or what not to say.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
In
going to
fact,
tell you, we were just talking the other night watching the Dodger game about Vin Scully. And when I lived in California for 10 years, we would specifically watch the Dodgers games just to listen to Vin Scully.
Absolutely.
The best. And tell a story, do a whole game by himself. It didn't matter what team hit a home run. There was the same enthusiasm. It was just Vin Scully. Nobody told him how to do his job.
Most enthusiasm for me, I'm being a name dropper here, you brought him up. I used to do a weekly show with Montreal in the Expos, and Tommy Lasorda and I became pretty close. But anyway, Tommy would call me from Philadelphia because there was always Philadelphia, a stop on the road, and then Montreal. So he'd call me and say, Rimmer, I checked your ratings out. They're pretty low. You need me on your show. Here's the deal. I'll come if you pay for my coaches and I to have dinner at Da Vinci's, which happened to be a sponsor, and the best Italian restaurant of all time. And of course, I was pretty close with the owner. You have me and my coaches on. I said, Tommy, I'm under strict orders. Just the coaches. Do not bring anybody else. Well, do you know that the Phillies arrived after an afternoon game in Philadelphia. Excuse me, not the Phillies. The Dodgers, after an afternoon game against the Phillies, arrived in Montreal. And what did Lasorda do? Not go to the hotel. He had the team bus come back to Da Vinci's on St. Catherine Street. Well, the bus stops. Out come the coaches. Out comes Lasorda. Rick Monday comes out. Steve Garvey comes out. Wouldn't you know it, Vin Scully comes out. And we all know what a great orator that Vin Scully was, and he was just speaking the superlatives about Da Vinci's restaurant. That's one of my all-time highlights. We got pictures, and it was just a great, great time.
I actually, before Vin Scully passed, I was watching something about him on whatever TV station it was, and he talked about meeting Babe Ruth. And when you think about because Vin Scully was 92 or 93 when he passed away, and I think he had Babe Ruth's autograph. Because they would already have pre-signed cards, and they would hand out the baseball cards to the little kids. And he had one from when he was a kid. This is a long time ago. You know, it's just so interesting how you're 2 steps removed from Babe Ruth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I apologize, but it is a hockey show, so
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
way more
hey,
interesting.
Not you. Well, just back to the Florida Panthers winning the Stanley Cup, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I'm just wondering, you must have been down here.
Yeah, I was here.
Because you've never left, right? You see all the place and everything. Yeah. They left a big group of teams that have never won a Stanley Cup into the pretty, it's not exclusive, but it's a cool group. What were you thinking when they won it?
I was pretty excited. It was time for this franchise. Bill Zito, who was our assistant general manager in Columbus for several years, a former agent, he has done a masterful job. You saw, Tom, you saw the situation last night with Reinhart in the game that he put on in Columbus last night. He is just an exceptional player, and it's funny. Paul Reinhart, who you might remember,
of course,
former defenseman of the National Hockey League, and great guy. We were in Buffalo. I'm with Columbus now. And Reinhart is going to play his first game in the NHL. And I knew Paul, and Paul comes over and he says, Jeff, I'm telling you right now, this kid is the smartest hockey player, bar none. He's smarter than I am, and he knows the game better. Hockey IQ is off the charts, and we're seeing that. Saw it last year, certainly are seeing it here in a quick start that he's had to the season. 50-plus goals last season. He can certainly eclipse that and more. Sam Bennett, another great acquisition by the general manager, Zito. What he was able to do in getting Tkachuk. This team was built by Zito and he's got some pretty good hockey people. Rick Dudley's one. I was with Rick Dudley here. I was with Mike Keenan here. You asked stories about those years. I just bought Keenan's book, by the way, in Toronto.
Have you read it?
I've started reading it, and it's exceptional. It's exceptional. I don't know if I believe everything in the book, but that's Mike Keenan. I'll tell you a quick Keenan story. Keenan and Dudley coexisted. Not well, but they did. He talks in the book about getting fired by Alan Cohn, then the owner, and then brought back, and Dudley getting fired. They were always at each other's. I got to clean it up, but it was.
No, you don't.
It was kind of nasty between the two. But anyway, we're in Chicago, and I check into the hotel, and I'm walking by the bar. You had to walk by the bar to leave. It was a hotel I'd never stayed in before. I don't even remember the name of it. I only stayed there once in my entire NHL career. And Keenan's outside the bar, and he sees me. He says, "Jeff, come on over here." So he walks me into the bar. He says, "I got a scoop for you." I said, "Oh, yeah?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "We're sending Stephen Weiss down." Weiss played the previous night in St. Louis. I thought he was the best player, aside from Luongo, the goaltender. And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, we're sending him down." I said, "You can't do this." He said, "Why do you say that?" I said, "He was our best player." Well, he turns to Paul Baxter and George Kingston, legendary Canadian coach that coach in the NHL, head coach in San Jose, and now was on Keenan's staff. And he says, "Jeff Rimmer says we're making a mistake by sending Weiss down." I said, "Well, why are you sending him down?" "Well, he's too cute. He was the #1 draft pick by Florida." No sooner do I leave the bar, my phone rings, and it's Rick Dudley. And how he knew that I just talked to Keenan, I don't know. He says, "I don't care what Mike Keenan has told you or will tell you, we are not sending Stephen Weiss down." He said, "Just so you know, we're flying in." I said, "I'm not the general manager. I'm not, management. I'm the broadcaster for the team." He says, "We're flying in Alan Cohn, myself, and the agent, Pat Morris, out of Toronto, out of Newport Sports." So they fly in, and Keenan did not win that battle. Dudley did, and Stephen Weiss stayed. I thought Stephen Weiss was a pretty good hockey player. I don't think he ever reached the stardom that he could have had.
I completely agree with that. Watching him in junior,
Right.
going, this kid is going to be unbelievable.
Great kid.
He was a great hockey player. I'm not sure where the disconnect was. But when you talk about Reinhart and Paul Reinhart, made me think of Cole Sillinger and that goal he got last night.
Oh, yeah.
And what a player he is. And Rod said to me, he's like, his dad couldn't score like that. I mean, he's such a smart player. He's a little bigger than Reinhart, but I think he's also another one of those guys that falls into that Columbus diamond in the rough kind of thing.
That's a great point by you. Funny.
Get that, Ben. Get that. That's a great point by me. And share it with Rod.
Mike Sillinger actually called me today. Here I am, name dropping again. Yeah. Well, Mike and I are great friends. Yeah. And I set Cole up with a car, because I had a car deal in Columbus and did commercials for Buyers Imports. Anyway, so he called me today because his other son, Owen, who's now in the system, got a 2-way contract. He's playing at Cleveland, but had a great camp. He'll get some games. But you know what? The best thing the Blue Jackets did was play some tough love. First with Cole Sillinger, and with other players as well. Kent Johnson is an outstanding talent, top draft pick. He's excelling right now. He looks so much better. He's put some weight on. Maybe the best thing that happened to him was he, too, tough love and got sent to Cleveland of the minors, then got called back up and then totally ripped up his shoulder, lost the balance of the season last year. But he's come back. He's thicker. He's better. And you're right, Cole Sillinger, he's playing the power play, he's on the penalty kill, and he has become an integral part of the team. Now, Mike Sillinger, and I love telling this story, he's played for the most teams in the history of the National Hockey League. How many teams has he played for? Good man. But he will tell you, when I say 12 teams, he'll say to me, "But I only got traded 10 times. One time at my place, I had one of those illegal dishes at the time, and I had TSN, and I had Len Berry, I had Mike Sillinger, Mike Russo, the great writer that he is now for The Athletic in Minnesota. And anyway, Sillinger sitting there. Oh, Ray Whitney was there too. And Ray Whitney's making fun of Sillinger. Oh, you haven't been traded yet. Haven't been traded yet. Wouldn't you know, 2 minutes later on TSN, not a phone call from the GM, Rick Dudley at the time, we've just got word that Mike Sillinger has been traded to the Ottawa Senators from the Florida Panthers. So, I mean, that was a funny time for everybody. But yeah, Cole Sillinger will be a much better player than Mike, and I've told him that several times.
Oh, he is.
Yeah.
And voice of the Regina Pats for 20 seasons.
Oh, wow.
So I know my Mike Sillinger history.
Yeah. He's a piece of work, that guy.
Yes, he is. Cole, just everything. Well, they're both great. But when Cole was 18, drafted that summer, he sat in my studio and said, I'm going to Columbus to make the team. And I said, yeah. He did, right? And he hasn't looked back. But I want to rewind this back to Mike Keenan for a second. Because he was on my show 2 weeks ago, my other show, my daytime show.
Promoting his book, I'm sure.
That's why he was on. But listen, I think Sarina watched that. He was awesome.
Oh, and he's a great guest.
Yeah, I'm a Keenan
fan.
I'm a Keenan fan
yeah.
Because all the guys that played for him that I know, Jeff Chikrin, Nick Kyprios, well, they all like him. I'm telling you, the guys that I know.
Don't ask Rod, or not Rod, but Roberto Luongo.
Okay, well, I won't. But here, I want you to corroborate this story. Because he said when he was coaching the Panthers, Alan Cohn was the owner?
Alan Cohn, yeah.
And he brought in Keenan and said, we're going to spend $60 million on salary this year. And Bure was part of that. And then they traded him away.
Yeah.
And Mike was like, what are you doing? And the salary cap got chopped from 60 to 30. Alan
Cohn was a very nice man, but a very different individual. Very different individual. Another story here. We're in St. Louis.
You're saying, Keenan, that was correct? You're saying that was correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. We're in St. Louis, and I'm about to check out of the hotel, the Sheraton, right across the street from, then it was, is it still Enterprise now? Whatever. Doesn't matter. Yeah.
The rink, yeah.
Anyway, I'm walking through the lobby. Alan Cohn and Rick Dudley are sitting there, and Dudley says to me, Jeff, you're in charge. I'm going scouting. And I said, okay, Alan, cough up a few bucks here. If I'm going to be the acting GM in the absence of Dudley, you got to pay me. So he, of course, had a laugh, and I left. Game comes, Roberto Luongo against McInnes, Pronger. I mean, just a loaded lineup. Luongo stands on his head, and it's probably in the book. Anyway, I know him getting fired is, and that's where I'm getting to. So he stops 20 or 21 shots. I remember as if it was yesterday. Spectacular saves. Everything they threw at him, except the kitchen sink. He gets pulled by Keenan, who had a habit of pulling his goalies. And St. Louis win the game. After the game, I'm on the bus. It was just one bus then. It wasn't a media bus. And I'm sitting on the bus, and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and waiting. Normally, we're out of there, especially after a loss in 25 minutes. Roger Nielsen, when he coached the team here in Florida, we were out in about 18 minutes after games. He was on the bus, and let's go, boys. Anyway, we're waiting and waiting and waiting. It must have been an hour and a half. So finally, Keenan gets on the bus, Alan Cohn gets on the bus, and we circle around. I'm expected to head right to the airport, and we stop by the Sheraton again. Who gets on? Rick Dudley. So we get to the airport. Dudley gets on. Cohen gets on. I get on third before Keenan. And I said, hey, I thought I was in charge. What are you doing? You're going scouting. Don't say a word. We land back here in Fort Lauderdale, the Executive Center, about 2:30. And we land, and I see Keenan get up. Couldn't get down the stairs quick enough, followed by Alan Cohn and Rick Dudley. 2:30 in the morning, and I'm watching as I walk down the driveway towards my car. They fire Keenan right there in the parking lot. In the parking lot, getting into his car. He had one door open on the Lexus, which the deal I helped him get, and he gets fired right there.
Harsh.
Whew. Yeah, but guess what? Then Dudley gets fired, and back comes Mike Keenan as general manager. In fact, Dudley got hired by Keenan. We were in Tampa Brian Murray was fired by Bill Torrey. Chuck Fletcher, the assistant GM, was made the acting GM. And we're in Tampa at the Marriott and downtown just across from the arena. And I go in for breakfast, and there's a partition here. One side, and it's not high, it's about this high. On one side is Chuck Fletcher. On the other side is Mike Keenan interviewing Rick Dudley. He's the coach, and he's interviewing Rick Dudley for the general manager's job. It was bizarre, and I'm listening to the conversation going on. It was great having Dudley there. He's a terrific hockey guy, very dedicated. He'd rather be on the road scouting players, be it in junior, in Europe, although he didn't like to travel by plane, or somewhere in the National Hockey League, and find players. And he's been a great asset to Bill Zito.
Yeah, and he's with the Panthers now, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you should write a book.
Yeah, I've been asked about that. I did talk to Scott Morrison, the legendary writer who wrote Keenan's book. He wants me to put something together. I've got a lot of stories, some of which probably shouldn't be told. But if you're going to sell a book, as, again, Doug MacLean told me when he wrote his book, which is a bestseller and is now in pocket or in hard softcover, well, you know, we're in another printing here now, and we're doing well. And there were a number of copies that were on the bookshelf when I bought my Keenan book. But anyway, Doug said, outstanding book, better than Keenan's, better than Kiprios's, better than every sports book written. And it was written by me.
Well,
with Scott Morrison.
Doug MacLean. He was something else. Which, well, that reminds me, Doug does not go to the games here. He made that very clear. He lives in Delray.
Delray, right? Yeah. Right on the beach in his high rise. It's worth $2 million. I'll tell you that. Yeah. Of course he did. Of course he did.
He doesn't go to the games. He doesn't want to go to the games. But
I can't go to games, he'll say, because the fans will be all over me. I mean, they'll want autographs. They'll want to talk to me about hockey.
That might be true, though.
Oh, can I tell you the best Doug MacLean ego story? We need him here to defend himself. And I'll bring this back up if we ever come here together. So he calls me. This is last winter. Calls me and he says, "You'll never guess what happened to me today." Okay. So he's playing golf with his group, and there's a husband and wife playing behind them. You'll love this. So he said, they keep hitting up to us. They keep hitting up to us. I said, well, what are they doing? We're not playing slow. So they get to 9. They're going to get a beer and a hot dog. And all of a sudden, the husband and wife drive up in their cart. And he loves getting recognized. Doug does. And this guy in a hat and sunglasses says, "Hey, Doug MacLean, how you doing?" Doug turns around. "Should I know who you are?" Like, "Hey, I've just been recognized." Mario Lemieux and his wife. True story. I said, "Doug, if I'm you, I don't tell anybody that story."
Get the damn bell out, Ben. That's the best. That's the best story we've had on this show. You've just topped Dale Tallon, I think.
The greatest
That's not hard either.
I have heard.
That's the best story on this show.
So my wife and I are at lunch in Boca here a week ago Saturday. And we sit down in the bar area, but my wife doesn't like to sit in high top chairs. So we're there, and I said,
"Thank you, Ben."
Right there is Mario and his wife. So they were already eating, and we were just starting to order. So I gave Mario a little distance, and I've interviewed Mario. In fact, Paul Steigerwald, the longtime broadcaster in my days in Washington, he was with Pittsburgh. He says, "I've got the longest interview in history, a post-game interview with Mario Lemieux." It was a playoff game, and we were filling time. The game was over early, so the producer in my ear keeps saying, ask another question. We need another 3 minutes. And Mario was great. He stood there, so I reminded Mario of that story. I didn't bring up the Doug MacLean story because I'm embarrassed for Doug. So what happens, Doug calls me and I said, "Doug, guess who I just bumped into?" He's, "Oh, did you tell him the story? No, I didn't." You should have told him.
Oh my God. There you go. That's the best story we've had.
How come we don't run into Mario Lemieux here?
Yeah, does he live here?
I feel disappointed.
He's got a place down here. He's in Boynton on the water. There's a bunch of Pittsburgh people that are there, and Mario was telling me he just flew in from Pittsburgh, so he comes back and forth often. So I just saw the red light go up in your head. You're going to try to get Mario here.
No, where my light went off was I just was just told the other night at the Panthers game in the press box that Gary Bettman lives just a couple blocks from us.
Yeah, he's in Boca.
Yeah,
Don't
and
care.
Serena's like, what'd you say you hoped you didn't see him in the street? You'd run him over.
No, I never said anything of the
making-
sort.
There's a lot of hockey people down
I'm making
here.
that up.
Get Mario. If you know Mario and you can get him in here, he'd be in my top 3.
I thought
Bernie
I was
Perron-
number one. Hold on a
You're
second
here.
here.
Top
Hold
You're
on.
here
in
now.
the
Yeah,
top
but
I've been
what-
trying for a year.
You're right. I told my wife before I came, I said, I owe Rod. He asked me so many times, but I couldn't after my surgery.
I understand.
I couldn't come.
I don't give up.
You wanted me here through the playoffs. And
That's
anyway,
right.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of, now we're running out of time. We're finally getting to the good stuff. You guys wasted all this time talking baseball.
There's
No,
never...
hold on a second here. We talked a legend.
Exactly. You don't waste time talking about Vin Scully. How dare you?
No, I was thinking Babe Ruth, but whatever.
Oh, well.
Dale Tallon gets so much crap around here.
Oh,
And that bothers
I'm
me because
glad
he's
you
such a
brought it
great
up.
guy.
Oh, well, he shouldn't get the crap because if
Well,
you
that
really look
too,
at it,
yeah.
if you didn't appreciate the moves that he made here to put Bill Zito in the position to make the trades to make this team better. So Dale did a great job, in my opinion. He's a great hockey guy. I think he deserves another shot. Look what he did in Chicago and then was unceremoniously dumped because of somebody else in the organization making mistakes as far as qualifying offers. Yet that team was built by Dale Tallon. He's one of the great hockey people that I know, and he's a great person to boot.
Yeah, well, it's funny because it didn't take much to get him going on this show, right? Like I just said, would you have signed Bobrovsky to that deal again? And he jumped about 3 feet high out of the chair. He's like, of course I would.
Yeah.
And look what he did.
But,
Sorry.
and I talked to Dale about this because there was one night in Columbus, and Dale and I have been friends for a long time, going back to his days as a broadcaster. And Dale was just spitting blood. And Bob was just terrible in Columbus. And it was the first time that he was back there. But he had the weight of that $10 million contract. Sure. I talked to Bobrovsky. I only went to one game. It was the first game against Tampa. I went into the room, spent some time with Bobrovsky. He's an exceptional person. I could tell you, I don't want to run out of time here. I could save it for next time.
There's the clock on the wall.
Okay, quickly. Bobrovsky's not only a great goaltender, he's a great person. We were in Minnesota for a game. Prior to that game, I became very close with Artemi Panarin, who, by the way, Tallon could have had the owner at the time approved what was an exorbitant amount of money, but he wanted a big signing bonus, did Panarin. He might have had Bobrovsky and Panarin. Bobrovsky, that $10 million contract weighed on his shoulders for a couple of years. He tried to, live up to that contract, and he really got messed up in the head. But anyway, Panarin comes to me and he says, "Are you flying home for Christmas?" You go to Florida in his broken English. And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I've already bought a ticket." Look who's calling.
Dale Tallon.
Bill Tallon. Anyway, I said, "Yeah." I said, "I already bought a ticket." No. You fly with Bob and I. So we played in Minnesota, 1 hour time difference. We already had a jet waiting for us. I was the extra guy. I said, what do you need from me? No, we pay. Bobrovsky went back to the hotel, had steak, lobster, all kinds of stuff, salad. And I said, no, I don't eat after a game. I don't want nothing. No, you're eating. They made me eat. But the best part was the bottle of wine, the red wine. It was the best wine I've ever had. We were here in 2.5 hours. They had a limo waiting for me. We landed in Miami at Opelika, and they had a limo waiting for me to take me to my home in Boynton Beach. It was terrific.
Not a bad life.
No, not a bad life. But it was a great and best plane ride that I'd ever been on.
I'm sure.
I bet.
You had a question.
Well,
last one.
No, just about Dale. I absolutely love Dale. I
tell
think
him.
he's got, I think he knows.
She gushed over
I
him.
love him. But he's got just such a phenomenal hockey mind.
Oh, yeah.
I like talking to him. He doesn't focus on ego. He doesn't care what people think. His beliefs are actually accurate. He's just so intelligent. His intelligence is unbelievable. And he was telling us on here about when he was broadcasting, and he's like, It was terrible hockey. And I burst out laughing just because the way he said it, but he just calls a spade a spade.
Oh, yeah, he's honest. He's as
Love
honest
him.
as they come. There's no BS with him. He's a straight shooter. He was that way as a broadcaster, and he was that way as a general manager, and he's that way now. He's working for Vancouver, and he's a key member of Jim Rutherford's staff, and he's just a terrific person. I'll make sure he knows. Not that he didn't know. And boy, if you didn't have the sidekick here,
I wouldn't get the guess.
well, not only would you not get the guest, but you wouldn't have the same show. Her contributions today are first rate, in my opinion.
Thank you. I love hockey, and we talk, and trivia wise, I probably know more than he does.
Oh, my God.
Oh, hey,
I have a good
guys.
memory. No, because I have a good memory. I remember every single thing that I have ever seen or heard for the most part, and I was interested in it. Like they called Frank Mahovlich the Big M. Well, Pete's bigger. Like his little things like that just, I love those
And
things.
Dale Tallon's mom
Yes.
is from a town in Saskatchewan 20 miles from her home.
Not even 13.
Really?
13
Yeah,
miles?
he's like, oh, my mom is from Momart. I was like, I grew up 13 miles from there. It's just,
Wow.
Well.
The hockey world is a small world. Chickern was in here. His dad was sitting
From
here.
Good Eves, Saskatchewan.
From
Yes.
Saskatchewan. Yeah,
Well,
so
we're going to wrap it up because Ben's got a date. So, courtesy the Beach House in Pompano. You've been there. You love it. $100 gift cards from our friends there, Thad and the crew.
Thank
They
you.
watch every show. So thank you, Jeff. Appreciate seeing you, man.
Hey, anytime.
Yeah,
I
we will
enjoyed-
do it again.
Yeah.
Be careful.
Well, I'll tell you right now, we can get Doug and I in here.
A celebrity boxing match.
I'm speaking for Dale Tallon. We could probably get Dale and I in.
That'd be a hell of a panel.
There'll be some fur flying, but other than that, that's what hockey's all about.
Dale's
Flying the fur.
Dale's usually golfing all the time.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that's something we can look forward to in the new year. Until then, thanks for watching, everybody. Great job, Benny boy. We'll see you next week here on Cats and Bolts.
Thanks for having me.